All right, y'all, welcome back to the MDs2B Podcast. This episode, we're going to be talking about what extracurriculars med schools love to see. My name is Ashish Nicodemus.
My name is Richard Zhao.
And my name is Teebro Rahman.
All right, so getting into it, some of the main things that med schools want to see from students is that they have a lot of extracurricular hours in volunteering, research, shadowing, and internships. So these are the four main topics that med schools really like to see because it really shows that the students that they're accepting know what they're getting into and they have dedicated a lot of time to the profession they're eventually going to be in.
And it also just shows that the students likely have great time management skills, just because at the end of the day, even if you have that 4.0 from that super nice university, if that's all you have on your schedule, it kind of looks like that's all you can handle at that point. But if you can clearly show you got a great GPA and you're involved in extracurriculars, not only does that show that you are an involved person in your community, you would likely have great social skills and communicative skills, but also shows that you're able to manage your time really well. You're able to find time for the stuff you want to do that help you decompress and the stuff you need to do for your academics. So overall, that just shows you're a firecracker of an applicant.
Yeah, so one reason why medical schools really like to see more well-rounded students now more than ever is that over the past 20 years, med schools have been implementing more problem-based learning into their curriculum, along with an increased emphasis on clinical skills during the first 2 years of med school. So extracurriculars such as volunteering and shadowing and research are much more important now because they teach students clinical skills such as bedside manner and working with the medical team rather than just book work and problem solving. So what do you think about that, Teebro?
I think that's 100% right, because at the end of the day, you don't want a physician who is competent but can't speak to you at all. You don't want to have a robot at your bedside when you're going through the worst day of your life when you're in the hospital. You want to have someone who is both intelligent and can speak to you like a human being, who is well-rounded and makes you feel like you're really being heard.
So here at USU, there's plenty of different volunteering opportunities that we have. Some of these include personal touch volunteering, the free medical clinic, Harvest Hope, Habitat for Humanity. I know that you two did personal touch volunteering. Can you guys speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so this is one of the most important experiences that I had during my undergraduate years because it really showed me what it's like to work in a healthcare team. So my responsibilities were to make rotations in the ED, the emergency department, and kind of check up on patients, take vitals when I had to, and just kind of make the patients feel comfortable in their stressful times in the emergency department. I got to form connections with a variety of different people and kind of learned how to have that patient caretaker interaction and how to kind of make someone feel comfortable when they're going through a rough time. So I know that these skills will help me as a future physician because I learned how to handle stress in the healthcare setting. So what do you think what was your experience like, Teebro?
Oh, I had a similar experience to you. I really did love my experience in the personal touch volunteer setting just because it really showed you a lot of the side of medicine you don't typically see in like Grey's Anatomy or Scrubs. My biggest takeaway from my similar experience in the ED alongside you was that I got to see the not-so-glamorous sides of medicine. And being able to talk about that in my application, I think really impressed the admissions counselors. That's because a lot of the times, on Scrubs or Grey's Anatomy, you see all these really grateful patients for these doctors and physicians who are just kind and cordial and are really glad for that doctor to be there. But in reality, a lot of times the ED, which you saw, were these cranky people who weren't exactly in the most cordial moods. And that makes sense. I mean, it is a terrible day for them, and you can't exactly expect them to be all chipper. But it really did provide me a new perspective that I didn't really consider before. But at the same time, seeing these physicians kind of be able to work through that negative energy they were encountering and still provide the best care, still provide that empathy that those patients needed was an amazing sight to see. And I'm so glad I got to see it because it really did cement my desire to become a physician. Furthermore, it also really taught me a lot about how the healthcare system works. Like getting to see the CNAs and the nurses in action really brought everything together.
I agree with everything you said, Teebro. And I remember seeing a lot of cool things that come into the ED, a lot of cool trauma cases that you don't really get to see in any other volunteer position. So I remember talking about a lot of these experiences during my interviews, and my interviewers were really impressed that I got to experience all these things before even coming into med school. And I know that, as Teebro mentioned before, it really taught me a lot about how the healthcare system works and how to be a part of a healthcare team. And I know that having these skills so early on will only benefit me in the future.
Yeah, and in regards to other volunteer activities that you can do in Columbia, I actually had a couple other volunteer experiences here in Columbia that I think are worthwhile to check out if you are a student interested in getting involved in your community and finding ways to spend your time at USC outside of just volunteering in the hospital. Two that I would highly recommend would be the Harvest Hope Food Bank in Columbia and the Habitat for Humanity build sites in Columbia. So when I volunteered at Harvest Hope, it was an awesome experience. You're just packing up food for those less fortunate at the Harvest Hope Food Banks. It's a great way to just interact with other people. It's a great way to have another perspective on how those with less resources are able to get their food on a day-to-day basis. And it was just a really awesome experience overall. And furthermore, I would have to say my personal favorite volunteer experience was the Habitat for Humanity builds in Columbia, South Carolina. So it was really easy to set up. Just go on their website and they have a bunch of build sites listed in Columbia and what dates they have builds. And not only did it really help me connect with people in my community that I had previously never crossed paths with, it also taught me a lot of pretty cool skills about handiwork and building that I now will take on with me in the rest of my life. For example, before I never knew how to use a drill, and now I can drill pretty well.
Very nice. Yeah, all those volunteer experiences are really appealing to med schools because it shows that you're willing to give back to your community even though you're going through the busy schoolwork of being a pre-med. So another thing that's really important for undergrads to have is research. I know you did a lot of research during undergrad, Richard. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so my research experience started my sophomore year. Ashish and I actually worked in the same lab. Over the summer, I decided to stay on campus and pretty much work 20, 30 hours a week in my research lab. And that really taught me a lot about perseverance and being reliable, dependable, which are all qualities that are important to the AMC as found on their core competencies list. Finding a research position was somewhat challenging. I know a lot of professors at USC, they're not really willing to take on too many new undergrads, and so it can take a bit of asking around to eventually find a lab that is willing to take you in. I think the easiest way to do that is just do some research on the faculty at your school, look at professors who are doing research that you might be interested in, read up on it, and then send out some emails just expressing your interest and hoping to set up a meeting to see if professors will be willing to take you in.
And to follow up on that, I would say very important whenever you see a professor whose research looks kind of interesting or looks like they might have a lab that you can volunteer in, they usually will have their publications listed under their faculty page. Read through some of those publications, get a general idea of what they're talking about, and when you send that email out, make sure to make it clear that you actually have an idea of what their research is. So maybe if were doing research on maybe fluorescence of zebrafish when you expose them to a certain chemical, make sure to mention that you saw that in their research and you're interested in that. Because it really will go the extra mile in proving that you will be a dedicated pre-med, that you're not just doing that to waste your time in their lab. You really will be an important part of their lab. So in regards to the types of research that you can do, it's pretty important to think about the clinical versus bench research. These are the most common types of research you'll encounter and you'll have a chance to get involved in before medical school. Now, obviously, there's other types of research beyond this. If you're in other majors, you might have access to more literature review types of research. We're just talking for more the standard science majors in undergrad tracks. So the differences being Richie and Ashish spent a lot more time doing bench research than I did. So why don't you guys talk about bench research for a little bit, and then I'll jump into talking about what clinical research was like for me.
Yeah, so our bench research was mainly focused on iron homeostasis and bacteria. And I thought that was really interesting. It honestly helped me a lot in my classes because a lot of the stuff that we were researching came up in our biochem classes and bacteriology classes. So being able to see it firsthand and conduct my own research on what I was learning in class was really interesting to me. And I actually brought it up during my interview because I had an interview with a PhD from a med school interview. And he did a lot of research along the same lines as what I did. And then we got to have a good conversation on what we found interesting about it and the future of research and eventually doing research at the med school I was accepted into. So I found that really interesting.
So similar to Richard and Ashish, I also did a little bit of bench research for about a year or two. But my clinical experience with research was probably one of my biggest takeaways in terms of preparing me to become a physician. So my clinical research project was going around to various OBGYN clinics in Columbia and doing surveys of the patients there in regards to certain health factors. I just thought this was an amazing experience because it really let me interact with these patients one-on-one. It let me practice my bedside manner, and it was really cool seeing the data all come together, seeing how the data was analyzed, and seeing how different population and socioeconomic factors could relate to medical outcomes in a variety of ways. It was awesome. I would definitely take a minute to consider what type of research works best for you. There's pros and cons to each. So for a bench research lab position like Richard's and Ashish's, it will really emphasize the hard sciences for you. And when I was doing it too, we would have to go through papers a lot. It would really help you learn how to break down these research articles and get the most out of them, and apply the concepts and content you'll take away from those articles to real-world experiments, which was just always awesome to see. But the downside is a lot of the time, these bench research positions can be very time-intensive, and they can be grueling on top of a already heavily loaded undergraduate schedule. Did you guys ever encounter that?
Yeah. It was. I did a lot of my research during my junior year of college, and that was the time where I was taking my hardest classes and also studying for the MCAT. So it's definitely a time commitment, but it also taught me the importance of time management, and it really helped me stay more organized, and I know these skills will help me in med school as well. What do you think, Richard?
Personally, I did most of my research over the summer, so that gave me the opportunity to solely focus on research for the time that I was doing it. Once school started back up, I did go in every week or so to run some experiments, but for the most part, I focused on my schoolwork. So there's also opportunities for you to separate your schedules based on the season or the semester. So that's also an option if you don't think that you'd be able to take on that load all at once.
So where volunteering and research are really important, and med schools really like to see it, I think one of the most important things that med schools want to see on your application is that you have a lot of shadowing hours. So shadowing means just kind of following various physicians and nurses around the hospital and kind of seeing what they do on a daily basis. So the reason that med schools really like to see this is because they want to have students that know what they're getting into. If a student applies to their school and has little to no shadowing experience, med schools are kind of hesitant to accept them because they're not too sure on whether or not the student knows what they're getting into or if they'll actually like what they're studying for. Can you talk a little bit about y'all's shadowing experiences and what you kind of learned from them?
Well, I had a pretty short shadowing experience. My time spent shadowing was about maybe 100 or 200 hours before I started college. The summer after I graduated high school, I got to shadow a great electrophysiologist who let me watch him do these procedures such as stent insertion and a bunch of other cool medical procedures. I got to watch him interact with his patients post and pre-operatively. It was just very cool to see. It really taught me a lot about his bedside manner. But I think the biggest takeaway for me from shadowing was just seeing how medicine was a field that you could always improve in. Because even though this physician had gone through residency, he'd gone through medical school, he'd gone through fellowship, he still took every day to read new research papers and research articles so he could be the best physician for his patients. And I just thought that was so cool that I would get to enter a field where every day I could learn something new. So that's what my takeaway from shadowing was. What was y'all's takeaway from shadowing like?
So I shadowed a bunch of different varieties of doctors. The first shadowing experience I had was with my own family physician. And I thought it was really interesting to actually see the behind-the-scenes work of someone who I had been seeing my entire life. Beyond that, I shadowed in the ER a lot, as well as I shadowed a psychiatrist. And I just found that it was so interesting to see the different applications of medicine. I mean, they all went to medical school, but they're all doing vastly different things. And it really just taught me to keep my mind open and to see that there's so many different ways you could use a degree in medicine.
Yeah, Richard, you said something really important. You shadowed a lot of different fields, and that was what I was going to bring up next. Where med schools love seeing that you have a lot of shadowing hours, they want to see you have a lot of shadowing hours in a variety of different specialties. This will kind of show them that you know what you're getting into, and you also kind of have an idea of what you want to do in the future. So I got to shadow a couple of ENT surgeons, and I mentioned in one of the earlier podcasts that this is what I really want to do. The reason that I really want to do it is because it balances surgery with a lot of patient contact. So there's certain days of the week where you're in the clinic and you're meeting patients and making connections with them, and 2 days out of the week, a lot of these ENT surgeons will solely do surgery. And I kind of like this balance, and being able to see it firsthand really showed me that this is a field that I think I could excel in and I would really enjoy. What about y'all?
For me, I really liked getting to see that electrocardiophysiologist, just the way he got to combine the surgery aspect of actually going inside the heart and physically manipulating the various valves and ventricles and stuff. And in addition, the way he also got to implement the medicine aspect of his specialty, but by being able to examine the metabolic functions of different diseases and the ways different drugs interacted was super cool to see. And it really made me interested in a specialty like that where I could combine the physical surgery and the more biochemical medicine side. So that was just really cool to see.
Another thing that many students do during the undergraduate years is internships. One positive of an internship is that many of them are paid. So while you're getting your clinical hours and learning about the healthcare fields during undergraduate years, you can make money as well to help out your family and help yourself pay for stuff while you're in school. So one internship that I found that was really helpful to me was the MedX internship. It's during the summer, and there's a lot of different things that you can do through this internship. You could shadow, you get to learn from various speakers that come and talk about their specialties and various physicians that come talk about their specialties. You get to learn from students at the Greenville Health System on their experiences applying to med school, as well as studying for their exams and studying for Step 1. You get to volunteer at various clinics throughout Greenville, so MedX was a really important internship to me, and I also got paid for it.
There are also a couple of other internships in the state that are relevant to the pre-medical curriculum, one of which is the DART program at MUSC. It's basically a summer research program that sort of focuses on drug addiction. And there's also the Finding Your Future program at USC Columbia, which is essentially a summer shadowing program where they set you up with a number of different doctors and you're able to shadow multiple different specialties in a short amount of time.
All right, so we kind of talked about the four main categories that med schools love to see, which are volunteering, research, shadowing, and internships. But although the medical schools like to see a large time devotion in these experiences, you can also devote a lot of time to something that you're really interested in, such as sports or music, and kind of tie it into how it fueled your passion for medicine. So whereas those four things med schools love to see, you could also be involved in a lot of other things that aren't clinically related and show that how a sport or playing an instrument has really made you more committed to your passion for medicine because it taught you
dedication to a craft. And there's 1,000 different ways that things you might not typically think of as being related to medicine can help. For example, I remember from my interview day, there was one student who got in who just wowed the dean and everyone else, just because when I asked about activities and stuff, he ran a YouTube channel, and just everyone thought that was so cool because it really showed that he was taking the time out of his day to edit together videos. It showed that he could be a public presence and he could speak well and enunciate himself well. It was just awesome. You might not typically think of that as a typical pre-med activity, but it really did go the extra mile in setting him apart from the other applicants that day.
I personally have been collecting sneakers for a couple of years now, and at first glance doesn't really have anything to do with medicine. But I managed to bring it up in my interviews a couple times because collecting sneakers has given me the opportunity to meet so many different people who I don't think I would have met otherwise, and it's just given me a better insight and a better perspective into other people's backgrounds, realizing the value of community and being able to connect with others. And finally, there are clubs at USC and most other undergraduate institutions that can really help you in your pre-medical experience. Personally, Ashish and I, we both joined the pre-medical fraternity Phi DE at USC, and through it we've met an entire community of pre-medical students here at USC who offer each other support in school, emotional support, and they're just always there for us whenever we need some friends to hang out with or some friends to take classes with, and it's been a truly enjoyable experience.
And beyond that, there's also other ways to get involved on campus extracurriculars and stuff. There's a wide variety of clubs on campus that are aimed for whatever purpose you might be interested in. Like we have jiu-jitsu clubs and ultimate frisbee clubs and charity clubs. Personally, if there's not a club that fits what you're looking for on campus, it's also super easy to start a club on campus. I started one my junior year called Distressed Children and Infants International. It was an extension of a charity I had been working with for a couple of years. It wasn't very difficult at all to start. All I needed was 10 signatures. and 10 members of my club, which I easily got with my friends. And it really did teach me so much about leadership, which is what med schools love to see. What about y'all's leadership experiences? Were there anything on campus that you feel like really helped you develop as a leader?
I didn't have any leadership experience on campus, but I was an ambassador for the medics program that I brought up before. And having this leadership role really stood out to med schools because it showed that I wasn't just a part of my club. I took it into my own hands to introduce what I thought was a great resource to other people along the pre-med track as well. So what do you think about your leadership experience, Richard?
So I was also a MedX ambassador, and I had the same experience, just being able to make others aware of it could possibly benefit from the program. In addition to that, FIDE, the pre-medical fraternity that Ashish and I are a part of, also offered a bunch of leadership experience. I remember my junior year, I led an event at a local rec center, and we threw a Halloween party for a bunch of kids in a socioeconomically disadvantaged area. And it was a lot of fun. We got to get a lot of our members to participate with us and just bring joy to the community, to the surrounding areas of Columbia.
And ultimately, I would personally say I think leadership is one of the most important aspects of your medical school application. Just becoming a better future physician. Just because as a physician, you will be the leader of that healthcare team. You are going to be the one who's going to be speaking to the nurses and the physician assistants and the certified nursing assistants in regard to your patient's medical plans, the strategy you want to go about, and you, as a physician, you will have to listen to the various aspects of your team and lead them towards the goal of a better overall health outcome for your patient.
So that really wraps it up, our discussion of extracurricular activities that can boost your pre-medical experience. We went over volunteering, research, shadowing, internships, hobbies, and clubs that you can be a part of. Really, just be sure to show admissions committees that you are human, you enjoy things outside of the classroom, you show a willingness to work with others and contribute to the community around you.
For sure. So make sure to stay tuned for our next podcast where we talk about some tips to enhance your undergraduate experience.